show with Flotsam and Jetsam. I load my bass cabinet into my Ford truck, right? 11 days later, playing sold-out shows in Japan with Metallica.
In an explosive new interview, former Metallica bassist Jason Newsted has finally broken his 2-decade silence on the real reasons behind his departure from metal's biggest band. What started as a discussion about his current projects quickly turned into a revealing exposé that has sent shockwaves through the metal community. From shocking claims about James Hetfield's controlling behavior to the revelation of a failed collaboration with Dave Mustaine that Metallica allegedly sabotaged, Newsted's statements paint a disturbing picture of his former bandmates. After 22 years, I think the fans deserve to know what really happened, says Newsted. This is the full story of betrayal, creative suppression, and the dark side of Metallica that fans never saw. Jason Newsted was born on March 4, 1963, in Battle Creek, Michigan. Growing up in rural Michigan, Newsted found his passion for music early, picking up the bass at age 14 after being inspired by Gene Simmons of Kiss and Geezer Butler of Black Sabbath. His technical skill and distinctive aggressive playing style earned him recognition in the underground metal scene, eventually landing him a spot in the innovative thrash band Flotsam and Jetsam. Everything changed for Newsted in 1986 when tragedy struck the metal world. After Metallica's bassist Cliff Burton was killed in a bus accident during the Master of Puppets tour, the band held auditions for a replacement. Competing against 40 other bassists, Newsted's raw energy and technical proficiency won him the coveted position in one of thrash metal's most promising bands. When I joined Metallica, I was 23 years old, and walking into a situation that no musician could truly be prepared for, Newsted recalled in his recent interview. They were grieving Cliff, and I was the new guy trying to honor his legacy while establishing my own place. It was an impossible situation from the start. Newsted's first recording with Metallica was 1987's The $5.98 EP, Garage Days Revisited, followed by the band's fourth studio album, And Justice for All. It was during the recording of this album that the seeds of discontent were first planted. Seeds that would grow into the conflicts Newsted has now revealed in detail. And Justice for All became infamous among fans for its lack of audible bass. For years, the official narrative was that this was simply a production choice, but Newsted's recent revelations tell a different story. What happened with the bass on Justice wasn't just some production mistake, Newsted stated. It was deliberate. James and Lars Ulrich were explicit about wanting the bass buried. They told the producer, "Turn the bass down so it's just barely audible." When I objected, James looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not Cliff. Know your place." According to Newsted, this pattern of creative suppression continued throughout his tenure with the band. While Metallica went on to achieve unprecedented success with 1991's self-titled Black Album and subsequent releases, Newsted claims he was consistently treated as a subordinate, rather than an equal member. There was a clear hierarchy in Metallica, Newsted explained. James and Lars made all the decisions. Kirk Hammett went along with whatever they wanted, and I was expected to simply execute their vision without significant input. Anytime I brought in ideas for songs, they were dismissed immediately. James would literally say, "Bassists don't write Metallica songs." Despite these challenges, Newsted remained with Metallica for 14 years, playing on albums that have sold over 60 million copies worldwide. In public, the band presented a united front. Behind the scenes, however, Newsted claims the relationship was deteriorating. The most shocking revelation from Newsted's interview concerns an incident in 1995 that involved Dave Mustaine, Metallica's original lead guitarist who was fired in 1983 before forming Megadeth. According to Newsted, he was approached by Mustaine about a potential side project. "Dave called me out of the blue in '95, Newsted recounted. He said he'd been thinking about a project that would combine his guitar work with my bass approach, something completely separate from both Metallica and Megadeth. I was intrigued because Dave, regardless of the history with Metallica, is an incredible musician." Newsted claims he carefully approached James Hetfield about the potential collaboration, emphasizing that it would be a limited project that wouldn't interfere with Metallica's commitments. James seemed okay with it initially, Newsted said. He literally told me, as long as it doesn't affect Metallica, do whatever you want. So Dave and I scheduled some jam sessions and started working on material. What happened next, according to Newsted, demonstrated the control Hetfield insisted on maintaining over band members. After Newsted and Mustaine had completed 3 demo tracks, word got back to Hetfield, who allegedly became enraged. James called me at 2 a.m., more angry than I'd ever heard him, Newsted revealed. He was screaming, "You're betraying Metallica by working with the enemy. This ends now or you're out of the band." I tried to remind him that he had given his blessing, but he denied ever saying that. According to Newsted, Hetfield went further than just shutting down the project. He allegedly contacted several studios in the Bay Area and told them not to work with Newsted and Mustaine. He effectively blacklisted us locally, Newsted claimed. Studio owners later told me they had been warned that working with us would mean Metallica would never use their facilities. When reached for comment on these allegations, representatives from Metallica stated that Jason's recollections differ significantly from the band's memory of events, but declined to address specific claims. Mustaine, however, has seemingly corroborated parts of Newsted's story, telling a metal journalist recently that there was definitely a project in the works that got torpedoed from above. This incident, according to Newsted, established a pattern that would repeat itself in 2001, when his side project Echo Brain became the final breaking point in his relationship with Metallica. Echo Brain was important to me creatively. It was music that didn't fit within Metallica's framework, Newsted explained. Initially, everyone in Metallica seemed supportive. Lars even came to early shows. But when we got label interest and it looked like it might be successful, James stepped in again with the same ultimatum: Metallica or nothing else. The official reason for Newsted's departure in 2001 was cited as physical damage and private reasons. Now, Newsted has clarified that while physical concerns from years of headbanging and performing were real, the primary reason was far more personal. "I left Metallica because I was given no option but to be creatively stifled," he stated. It was clear that despite contributing to the band's biggest successes, I would never be allowed to express myself fully as a musician within that structure. James couldn't handle the idea of any band member having creative identity outside of his control. Newsted's revelations extend to the band's interpersonal dynamics as well. He describes an environment where Hetfield struggles with alcoholism, which would eventually lead to his rehab stay in 2001, created an unpredictable and sometimes hostile workplace. There were days when James would be completely different people from morning to night, Newsted recalled. He could be your best friend at noon, and by 8 p.m., after a bottle of whiskey, he'd be threatening to fire you for something trivial. We all walked on eggshells constantly. According to Newsted, this volatility extended to how the band treated others in the industry, including their contemporaries in the thrash metal scene. He recounts a particular incident involving Dave Mustaine in 1999 that he found especially troubling. "We were headlining a festival in Europe, and Megadeth was also on the bill," Newsted said. "I suggested that we invite Dave up for a song during our encore, something I thought fans would love. James not only refused, but demanded that festival organizers ensure Megadeth played on a completely different day than us. The hatred there went beyond professional rivalry. It was pathological." Mustaine, who has had his own well-documented feuds with Metallica over the decades, appears to have found an unlikely ally in Newsted. In response to Newsted's recent comments, Mustaine told a metal news outlet, "Jason was always the most reasonable guy in that band. What he's saying now lines up with my experiences with Metallica's leadership. They create this brotherhood image for the public, but behind closed doors, it's a dictatorship." Perhaps most revealing are Newsted's comments about the band's relationship with money and image. According to the bassist, the turning point in Metallica's history wasn't just musical evolution, but a calculated business decision. Around the Black Album, there was a complete shift in priorities, Newsted claimed. Suddenly, every decision was filtered through, will this make us bigger? Will this make us more money? The music became secondary to building the Metallica Corporation. Anyone who questioned this direction was seen as not being a team player. This preoccupation with commercial success, according to Newsted, led to the controversial stylistic changes in the 1996 album Load and 1997's Reload, changes that alienated many longtime fans. Those albums weren't about artistic exploration as the band claimed, Newsted stated. They were about James and Lars seeing what was selling in the mid-90s and trying to capture that market. When I suggested we stay truer to our thrash roots, James actually said, "Those days are over. Thrash doesn't sell stadiums." Despite these criticisms, Newsted is careful to acknowledge the musical achievements of Metallica and his pride in much of the work they created together. "I'm not denying the greatness of what we accomplished," he said. "Those songs, those tours, connecting with millions of fans, that was real and important. I just think fans deserve to know that the brotherhood they thought they were seeing wasn't the complete picture." Since leaving Metallica, Newsted has pursued various musical projects, including Voivod, Newsted, and more experimental work. He's also focused on his visual art career, exhibiting paintings in galleries across the United States. Despite achieving success in these ventures, he admits that the shadow of Metallica has been difficult to escape. "For years I was known primarily as former Metallica bassist Jason Newsted," he said. "Every interview eventually turned to questions about them, and I always took the high road. I never wanted to seem bitter or ungrateful for the opportunity Metallica gave me, but there's a difference between being grateful and being silent about mistreatment." When asked why he's chosen to speak out now, Newsted cited a recent health scare that made him reevaluate his life. "When you face your mortality, you start thinking about your legacy and the truth you want to leave behind," he explained. "I don't want the sanitized version of history to be the only one that exists." Newsted also revealed that his silence over the years was partially due to a non-disclosure agreement he signed upon leaving the band, an agreement that has recently expired. "There were legal reasons I couldn't speak freely before," he said. "That's no longer the case." The relationship between Newsted and his former bandmates has been complicated in recent years. He briefly reunited with Metallica for their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2009 and for their 30th anniversary concerts in 2011. These appearances, however, were limited and didn't lead to any substantial reconciliation. "Those events were cordial but surface level," Newsted said. "We played the roles the fans expected to see, but there was never any real addressing of the past. James and Lars are masters at maintaining the public image they want people to see." The most poignant part of Newsted's interview came when he discussed what might have been if Metallica had operated differently. "There was so much more music that could have been created if there had been true collaboration," he lamented. "Imagine if all four members had been encouraged to bring their best ideas forward, with no ego or control issues. That would have been a different and possibly even more powerful Metallica." When asked about his relationship with Dave Mustaine since their aborted collaboration, Newsted revealed a surprising development. "Dave and I have actually reconnected in recent years," he said. "We both understand what it's like to be on the outside of something we helped build. There's been talk of finally finishing what we started back in '95, now that we're both free to do so." Mustaine, when asked about this possibility, seemed enthusiastic. "Jason is one of metal's most underrated bassists," Mustaine said. "If we did work together now, it would be about the music, not about getting back at anyone, though I can't deny there would be a certain poetic justice to it." The fallout from Newsted's revelations has been swift and polarizing in the metal community. Fans have divided into camps either defending Metallica or expressing support for Newsted's decision to share his experiences. Several musicians from other prominent metal bands have privately reached out to Newsted in solidarity, though most have avoided making public statements that might jeopardize their relationships with Metallica. Industry insiders familiar with Metallica's operation have noted that Newsted's account aligns with what many have observed from the outside. A former producer who worked with the band during the Load era and requested anonymity stated, "What Jason is describing was visible even to those of us on the periphery. James and Lars controlled everything, and the dynamic was clearly unbalanced. I'm actually surprised Jason stayed as long as he did." Metallica's current bassist, Robert Trujillo, has maintained a diplomatic silence on the controversy. Trujillo, who joined the band in 2003, following the brief tenure of producer Bob Rock's recommended replacement Jason Newsted, has generally been perceived as having a better relationship with Hetfield and Ulrich than his predecessor. "Rob came in during a different era," Newsted observed. "After my departure and James's rehab, I think they realized some changes needed to happen. From what I can see, they give Rob more respect than I was afforded, though I still wonder how much creative input he actually has. While many of Newsted's criticisms focus on Hetfield, he also addressed his relationship with drummer Lars Ulrich, Metallica's other founding member and driving force. Lars and I actually got along well personally, Newsted said. But professionally, he would always side with James in any dispute. He'd sometimes privately tell me he agreed with my position, then completely reverse course in band meetings. That two-faced approach was almost harder to deal with than James's direct control. When discussing Kirk Hammett, Metallica's lead guitarist since 1983, Newsted seems to have a more sympathetic view. Kirk was caught in the same system I was, just with more years invested, he explained. He learned early on that the path of least resistance was to focus on his solos and leave the big decisions to James and Lars. I think he has far more creative ideas than he's been allowed to express in Metallica. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of Newsted's interview was his revelation about a conversation with Cliff Burton's parents. Cliff's father called me about a year after I left Metallica, Newsted shared. He said, "Cliff would have left too. He wouldn't have put up with what you described." That meant everything to me, to know that the man whose legacy I was always measured against might have made the same choice I did. As for the future, Newsted seems at peace with his decision to speak out, regardless of the controversy it has created. "I gave Metallica my absolute best for 14 years, he concluded. "I have nothing to be ashamed of. If telling my truth makes some people uncomfortable, that's not my problem. The fans who've supported me understand that this isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about finally standing up for myself." When asked if reconciliation with his former bandmates is possible after these revelations, Newsted was realistic but not entirely pessimistic. "James and Lars don't like having their control challenged," he said. "So I'm not expecting Christmas cards this year. But we're all getting older, and life's too short for permanent grudges. If they ever want to have an honest conversation about the past, I'm open to that. I just won't pretend things were different than they were." As for the teased collaboration with Dave Mustaine, both musicians have confirmed that preliminary work has begun on what Mustaine describes as a project that will surprise people who think they know what we're about. Whether this partnership, originally thwarted by Hetfield in 1995, will finally come to fruition remains to be seen. What's clear is that Jason Newsted, after decades of taking the high road, is finally reclaiming his narrative. In doing so, he's pulled back the curtain on one of metal's most powerful and tightly controlled bands, revealing the complicated human dynamics behind the music that has defined multiple generations of fans. For metal's faithful, it's a reminder that even legendary bands are made up of flawed individuals navigating complex relationships. For Newsted, it appears to be something simpler but more profound: the freedom that comes with finally telling his truth.